And My Mental is a live podcast, and as such, we start each episode with a 5-minute instrumental to allow people to join the chat room and not miss the beginning of our actual broadcast. If you are listening to this after it has been aired, feel free to skip ahead to the 5-minute and 30-second mark in order to pick up the episode. Otherwise, if you like instrumentals, enjoy. The following broadcast is intended for mature audiences. These are real people sharing very real, deeply personal experiences. This content may be considered triggering for others and for those who are sharing. The chat room is a privilege intended for discussions and sharing. You are not being asked to agree, but you are being asked to stay civil and refrain from personal attacks. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Am I Mental? A live podcast where people share stories about how life impacts mental health and mental health impacts life. I'm your host tonight, E, and with us, as usual, is co-host Os.
What's up, Mental fam?
And we have Sarah helping out tonight.
Hey guys.
So we did have a guest scheduled, but due to a horrible migraine that I have right now, I haven't been keeping very good contact, and they may have forgotten that they were supposed to be on tonight, so they haven't responded to anything. So we are doing a backup episode. We're going to be talking about living life with, God, my migraine's really messing with me.
Fear of failure.
Yeah, fear of failure. Yeah, something I live with actually as well, but I'm not going to be able to keep it together enough really to run this episode, so I am going to be bouncing out and letting you guys take it. But before we do that, for everybody that's listening, if you're not on our Discord, please join it. I do make a point before every episode, about a half hour before we go live, to send out an announcement. And as long as you have notifications turned on in Discord and have them turned on for our Discord server, you'll get a notification that we're about to go live. That way I don't have to do a blast out over Facebook messages to everybody. You can also set up a reminder and your calendar. That way you don't miss any episodes. Because we definitely enjoy having you all in the chat room. Like, seriously, love having you guys. With all that said, Os, Sarah, take it away.
Thank you. Today is Sarah's topic. She came up with this. So Sarah's going to be driving the show with us. I'm just along for the ride so that we can get a conversation going around the topic. And hopefully you guys, you gals out there and everything in between joins us in chat.
Yeah, so
Sarah.
Austin and I actually come from kind of separate sides of this coin. I'm in an interesting place right now because I recently started back on my antidepressants after some years. And so a lot of this has faded into the background recently and kind of makes me like I have this really big contrast moment going on. But I have this sort of incredible oppressing fear of failure constantly, and Austin basically has none of that almost. So
yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
So I think it kind of all started for me with the way I was raised. My mother was bipolar, and she was in the hospital for suicide attempts off and on when I was a child. So I got into this place where I felt like, if I upset her or if something I did was wrong, then, she might die, essentially. And also, I grew up out in the country, in the suburbs, and we were, kind of poor and lived in the older part of town. But the suburb that we lived in outside of was a really kind of posh, cliquey, very appearance motivated and money motivated kind of place. I've always been heavy. Um, so um, the um, like the general sense that I got both from kids and adults was that I was defective. Um, Adults like my mom's friends when I would meet them, and even my grandmother would say things like, "Oh, you have such a pretty face. If only you lost some weight." Or my grandmother used to offer $1 a pound if I would lose weight. Um, so I always had the sense that like I was defective in some way. I don't do the things that I want um, a lot because I feel like I'm I don't have the right to want to do that. Art is one of those things. Anything artistic or skilled, like I would think. I love to draw. I'm actually pretty good at it. Um, but I would think like, oh, I can't do anything in like the art community or really show people my art because I'm not an artist and you know I'm just not good enough for essentially anything. Um, I had this problem with the podcast, as a matter of fact, in the beginning, because I'm really good at giving other people advice and sort of breaking down, um, what other people are going through and figuring out where that comes from. And I can even do that for myself, but I'm kind of useless to know what to do with it in general. But so I always had, always wanted to be a therapist. Always wanted to do something in that vein to help people. And so when the podcast came up, I really had to kind of fight with myself to like be forward about um, becoming, um, active in it and whatever. But that I realized here recently that all of those things from when I was a child, like I've set up my life so that, I moved 1,000 miles away and I don't see any of those people anymore. And um, when I first met Austin, it was like this whole other world of people that, not only didn't care that I was fat, like it just wasn't a thing. Like he thought I was beautiful and funny and smart. And like there was none of that only if business.
It's because you are. It sounds like you've been programmed from day one to doubt yourself.
Yeah, pretty close.
And even though you have designed your life around having as positive of an environment as possible, all those echoes of the past are so prevalent, that they still affect you very much today. And through therapy and medication, it's still a struggle. That's really rough.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had gotten to a point I think where I felt like I had it beaten, like I was, I had arranged my life so that I was, you know, tough and I could, just sort of hammer through um and like bury all of that. But I also hid out a lot. Um, didn't have groups of friends. Um, I didn't, I was never sort of forward with that. And I always had this um, I guess roughness about me, kind of like RBF personality. People tell me a couple times over the years, like, that I seem like hard to approach. And it's not at all because, I don't want to be around people. It's that I have this kind of
A defense
I remember,
mechanism.
yeah, when people would be nice to me at school, like I would always be afraid that they were gonna like just be trying to play some kind of joke on me or something. And I still have figured out like the closer I get to people and the more comfortable I become around them, or the closer I get to them, the more uncomfortable I become. Um, and I thought that I had really kind of moved past all that, but I'm finding it bite me in the ass here a lot lately.
It's almost like with those close relationships, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop type of thing. It sounds like.
Exactly. Oh, Kat said my grandma would have had to pay her $45 this year. and Richard wants 100. Yeah, I actually have lost 55 pounds this year. Um, just because something is weird with my stomach. I can't really eat dairy anymore, so just that has kind of staved that off, I think. But I thought that I had gotten to a place where I was comfortable in my own skin and whatever. But it was kind of like I don't know. It was almost like to spite people. So when I'm around people who are really genuine with me, it just makes me exceedingly uncomfortable. And the whole feeling of failure is like all pervasive. Poor Austin, he has to deal with me on holidays, like I freak out if the timing isn't right, or if, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, or um, whatever. And it's, like I can
Everything has
see,
to be just
especially,
so.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can see in those instances that like I'm miserable to be around because I'm just so stressed out. But I'm not,
Well,
honestly, I'm
it's
not
not just
sure that I,
it's not it's not just that you're miserable to be around. I think what's most important is that while you're trying to do these things for other people and create a home and an inviting environment and a memorable holiday, you're making yourself completely miserable while trying to bring joy to others. And that's really hard in itself.
yeah, I've never really thought of it that way, I guess.
Well, you wouldn't because you're a giver, right? You don't think of the things you put yourself through to make sure that other people are happy because you're used to bearing the burdens of that, but that's pretty big that, and it's a selfless act to basically torture yourself trying to gain perfection just so that, and that perfection isn't for yourself. Even if everything was perfect, you wouldn't, I don't think you would feel that sense of satisfaction. You would still find something to nitpick and worry that something was wrong, even though it's like the most magical event ever.
Oh man, that was my grandma. Like every meal that she ever put on the table came with an apology for something. And yeah. And I hadn't
Is
really
that
thought
is that
about
where you get your sorry Sarah from thing?
maybe. Yeah, maybe. That's quite
Sarah is what
possible.
she calls a sorry Sarah. So
That was my ex's term for me. I'm a sorry sayer.
and for everything, for she could accidentally injure herself in a room by herself that doesn't impact anybody else, and she will apologize to you when she sees you for injuring herself. It's a type of sorry Sarah, um, because she doesn't want to worry you about her injury. You know,
Yeah, and there's a lot of God, I feel like looking back at, you know, certain things like I beat myself up for everything. Like I realized about 6 months ago, um, that I kind of hate myself, Like I I know that I'm competent and, you know, I'm smart and kind of kick ass for a girl, like I work on cars and I build
not for
things
girl, for
and
anybody. You're kick ass
uh,
for anybody.
no, that's fair. Sorry, my bad. I know, yeah, but you know what I mean, like because I that's another sort of label, that's always been I'm always fighting as a woman is that whole like people don't assume, you know, that I can do things even if I tell them or, whatever. Um, but yeah, so that's another one I've been bucking for trying to anyway for a long time. Um, but yeah, so like I know that I have strengths and there are things that I know I can do well, but they like just in general, the way I think about myself, like I realize like I have to hate myself to think the things that I do all the time. Um, my there for a while, my self talk was like pretty vicious, and I'm still kind of fighting it somewhat with the antidepressants now. Like I don't, it's not that my self talk has necessarily changed. I feel like my head is out of the toilet quite a bit that it was kind of in. Um, and I don't feel like I have a lot of self-talk now. Like it kind of took kind of because I used to sit and sort of spin out and think and think and think about things, all the implications, which I'm pretty good at. It's always made me good at like heading off problems, but I would really just get kind of stuck there. Um, and so it seems like that whole like constant conversation in my head has kind of quieted so much, somewhat. Um,
And self
think
talk's really really important. You know, they're just
yeah,
kind
I'm
of
trying
like
to think like what it's
the
been like the last couple of weeks, and I just kind of can't.
and and for those who are listening who aren't who may have heard the term self talk but they're unfamiliar of it with it, it's those things you tell yourself where, say you make a mistake, in your head, or if you're talking out loud, are you telling yourself, "Come on, you can do it," or are you telling yourself, "Oh, you're such a mess up. How could you screw this up?" Right? It's that voice inside your head where you communicate with yourself. Are you your own biggest critic in those moments the majority of the time, or are you a cheerleader to yourself? Are you being the friend to yourself that you are to others when they do the same things? And it's a struggle for a lot of people. That's what Sarah's talking about, is beating herself up when she's in her own head, as a result to something that she may not be happy with.
Yeah, that whole you are your own worst critic thing definitely applies to me. I'm I've found myself saying a lot over the last couple of years, I'm not this kind of person because you know, um, I've had points in my life where I'm confident in myself and I'm comfortable with who I am and, just generally happy. But then, you know, my depression kicks in or, I think I just had kind of a lot over a short period. Um, you know, I had to leave my son's father and moved like three times in a year, which is hard. And and you and I got back together. It was all sort of a rush, and I didn't have time to downshift, and I didn't have time to really think. So my head was just kind of this big angry pot that I kind of had to ignore because there was too much going on, really, to be able to take the time and think about it like I would have had it not all been a rush. Normally I would spend like a year or something like downshifting from something like that, um, but
Yeah,
I
which
just
I
didn't
didn't get
have
at
it.
first because I'm the polar opposite. Like, I am by the seat of my pants, can change gears in an instant. Don't think twice about it because I don't have to. I'm fortunate where I don't overthink things. I probably underthink them. I'm very reactionary, so it was really hard for me um, to relate and to empathize in some of those instances where you struggled with it the most, where you're like there's a lot of doubt that was in there. Like, did I do the right thing? Whatever that thing may be, with us. And with me, I'm like, we're here right now. I'm in the moment. Um, and I don't question it. I just make the best of every moment. And, I might bitch and complain sometimes, but then I think that happens few and far between. I'm just nose to the grindstone, put in the work or whatever needs to be put into, and just kind of shoulder it and push through. Um,
Yeah, see,
I'm not in my head.
for me, I growing up the way that I did, there was always some big emergency, right? Like with my mom or whatever. And so I'm very good at crisis management. I'm very good at, stuffing things down and moving on like it's all fine. But um, somewhere in my mid 30s, I hit a point where it was like I just could not take any more stress. I started having panic attacks. And I couldn't like, and I was still in a really stressful sort of period in my life. Um, and so I found, a way to cope essentially by just turning everything off. Um, but I guess you can't sustain that forever because after this last, period of transition, like something in me just broke. Like I was crying all the time. Um, I've never been a person who cries a lot. Um, and I was angry. I was so angry. I've never been an angry person. Part of um, where I ended up with all of that, um, being treated badly my whole life. And like, I didn't date, I didn't have, people who liked me. I had sex at a very young age, like, 14. And there were people who would want to have sex with me sometimes as I was growing up, but they would never talk to me at school. They never wanted to be seen with me anywhere. Um, and so a big part of kind of like the backlash for that. I'm very sensitive because of having to watch, my mom's reactions all the time for her emotions. I'm very empathetic. And so trying to find my place in the world, where I ended up was, okay, I guess my purpose, since I can't, really live my own life, since I can't be like the main character in my own story, I guess my purpose is just to take shit off other people, like to do what I can to, so I would do everything I could for somebody, not necessarily help them, find their path on their own, but I would just take whatever it is on um myself, like to the point of pain and broke and emotionally distraught, and because I thought that was my place in the world. I thought that was the purpose that I could serve. Um, and so, you know, getting to a point in my own life where like I kind of had to sit down and my therapist said to me the other day, um, because I've had all this stuff kind of bubbling out of what feels like nowhere, but it's really not. He said, you're at the point in your life now, like you've got the love of your life and you have a child and you bought a house and you're in all these situations that you always thought, once this happens, I'll be happy. And you're not. So, and that's kind of how I feel. Like I'm comfortable with you. I'm comfortable with our life. Like I finally feel like I am the main character in my own story. But now my brain's like, okay, you've ignored us long enough. And now you're going to deal with us. And it's not really a situation that I've ever been in before, with the exception of those panic attacks a few years ago when things started leaking through. And, I did what I do. I, shoved it down and moved forward because that's what I'm good at. um, but it didn't work so much this time.
Yeah, it's been a rough road. You'll have moments where you'll have where things will be going, everything needs to be going exceedingly well. Things with your son, things with us, things at work, and everything is lined up. Then you start to feel pretty good. Um, but if anything is out of balance, if anything, I think sometimes even starts to tip the scale in the direction where you should worry, you start to spiral pretty quick and pretty
Yeah, and
hard.
it's not even necessarily even if it's just reminders. Matter of fact, we had our neighbor on, Paul, on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking a lot about, processing things in his childhood, um, bad parents and substance abuse problems and mental health and, you know, um, and dealing with being beaten up and, and like when I'm talking to people or when I hear other people talking about things. My position is to either, go into therapy mode where I'm trying to counsel them and help them, or I just sit quietly and there's this part of me that's like, you do that too, you have that too, speak up. But then I'm like, no, I don't want to, I don't want to interfere, I don't want to intrude, nobody cares about, my shit or whatever. So I don't. And after that podcast, um, I was, it was a small thing. Like it was a really small thing. Um, I was texting somebody who like kind of never texts me back. Um, and it just made me go back to, feeling invisible and people not, I was already kind of emotionally amped up because, like I said, the podcast brought up kind of a bit for me. And then I just started bawling like uncontrollably. And we do this thing every night with my son's father where we get on the phone and we all four do high low together. We say what our good parts of the day is, what our bad parts of the day is. And I had to have, Austin cover for me because I couldn't stop bawling downstairs. Um, and they're just so it doesn't even have to be anything big. Um, they I had I've had depressive disorder pretty much my whole life since my early teens. They have now transitioned my primary diagnosis to complex PTSD, um, because of all of these things that are just like, in my past that are kind of forcing their way to the surface at inopportune moments. Um, like I
Can
said,
you break down what what you've learned complex PTSD is?
yeah. So, normally when people think of PTSD, they think of vets or, women who have been raped or, these big violent incidents that give you flashbacks and, they make you very hyper aware. Um, so PTSD is like that, except for not that, there aren't major incidents, but instead of having this one or a couple of big, um, you know, like point out easy experiences to identify, you have years worth of small ones or,
It's a
repeated
death of a
exposure
thousand cuts.
essentially. Yeah, exactly. Um, and so they said, it's harder to treat because it's easier for people to push down those kind of experiences and try to keep marching forward than it is some one big thing that like floors you. But also it's it can crop up for that same reason years later, and it's hard to identify what exactly, at least for me, and from what my therapists and psychiatrists are saying, it is for a lot of people, pinning down what exactly all of that's from. So, they try to focus on the feelings and the thoughts around when those episodes happen. Because I would be downstairs, folding laundry, and then all of a sudden I would feel like I was standing in a toilet that had been flushed. Like, um, I would feel like I was like my gut fell out, my stomach fell out, and I would feel like I was spinning and gonna fall, um, and I would find myself holding my breath a lot. Like when you hear a noise and you're trying to figure out what the noise is, so you hold your breath so that the sound of your own breathing doesn't interfere with your hearing. I would just figure out that I had been standing there essentially holding my breath for like a couple of minutes. So I've had to start doing breathing exercises to like work past that, and it's it's kind of been
And
hell.
that's
And
expanded. It's expanded past those your anxiety attacks too. It'll happen if we're watching TV and something even slightly intense happens. For a lot of people, I think it's normal. If you're watching something suspenseful, everybody will
I
hold their breath for a moment, but you'll just
I
hold your breath seemingly at random.
yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like the other night when you turned off that show, it really had nothing to do with the show because I wasn't really even thinking about it, and I can't tell you. I like I was thinking about something else and I can't even tell you what it was. I don't even think I could then. But yeah, like all of a sudden I just feel like something is very, very wrong. And my head starts swimming and then I have to breathe through it and tell myself it's okay. There have been some physical things going on with me for a couple of years too that like we've been trying to figure out with the doctors and so I become very hyper aware of things that could hurt me. And I used to love those shows about, weird ways people die, except now everything in my life has become that to a certain extent. I've really been working on trying not to do that, but like for example, we have some stuff that you sprinkle in your wood burning fireplace, kind of like the chimney sweep logs. It's the same chemical that's in it, but it's a tub, and you take a little plastic scoop and you sprinkle it in there on the coals. And I went to use it, and I was reading, because it's like wear gloves and eye protection or whatever. So I got a plastic bag with the scoops out because I couldn't find the gloves, and some fell on my other hand. Um, and I went I handed it to my son's father, who was here for a visit at the time, and I was like, I'll be right back. I went and rinsed off my hand, and then I tried to get on the internet just to make sure that there was nothing else I needed to do. And the chemical that's in it is TSP. It's trisodium phosphate, I think. Um, and so I went and looked that up, and you have the sort of description on Google that shows up on the main page, and I couldn't even click on it. um TSP comes in, dry granules and the liquid, and there was like things like skin irritation, and then I'm pretty sure it was talking about ingestion of the liquid, but it was talking about, um heart attack, death, stopping breathing, and I couldn't read any farther. I had to stand up and walk away, um because it was starting to throw me into a horrible panic attack. And if I kept reading, I knew I was going to lose my shit. So I couldn't even get the information I need. I had to just get up and walk away. And it took me, 2 or 3 minutes to get my heartbeat back where it was supposed to be. And it's frustrating because it's like, okay, great. If I am actually poisoned, like, how do I tell if I'm actually poisoned or if it's this freaking panic attack? Because I imagine it would, feel pretty close to the same either way. I feel like something is wrong. I feel like I can't breathe. Sometimes I feel like there's an elephant sitting on my chest. 2 years ago, I went to the emergency room to make sure that I wasn't having a heart attack because I have a lot of pains in my joints also. And this last year we went because I had some shooting pains down my shoulder and I felt like I was having trouble breathing, and I couldn't be sure if it was a panic attack and my shoulder hurting or if I was having a heart attack, you know? And I'm a very logical, pretty well-read person where medical things concern, and I'm really logical, but when I get in like that logic and that knowledge takes me some scary places in my head, and I have trouble finding the middle ground a lot now.
Yeah, it's you do find yourself going to the worst. Like
Oh no, what
it's
I bring up is like middle of what looks like middle of the road to me.
yes, but
There's way worse than there, I think.
yeah, but what I'm saying is when you're going through episodes like that, it's if something says it has these slight side effects, your mind sounds like it's going like, well, it looks like I have all these, even if it's a minute chance of having whatever the side effect is, you start to think,
Right. My
could
fear
could
is
this
that I'm
be?
gonna be, yeah, my fear
Could
is
this
that
be it?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna be on the worst end of the spectrum. Or like I said, a lot of times like I'm already having symptoms because of my panic attack. So then it's hard, at least in the beginning, it was hard to figure out, is something really wrong with me or is this just, you know, worse panic attacks than I've ever had?
So you've you definitely have a lot of fears. You in a lot of ways you do live in fear. What are some of the things you're doing to mitigate those fears, to calm those fears when they happen, or to, in a healthy way, avoid yourself from spiraling?
let's see. I got one of those little, I'm in therapy for one. I have a good therapist. He's not the greatest at keeping his schedule though, and that was something that I had trouble with because when he, I guess when he rolls his schedule over to the new month, not everything comes over automatically. And so for me, that would feel like, oh, he doesn't care, he doesn't whatever. And if I was in a bad place, then I wouldn't reach out to him. Um, and you actually, God love you, had to be like, hey, you were supposed to be in therapy and you were supposed to be looking at medication. You need to do that. And I'm like, okay. But
Yeah.
um, so therapy, I've been learning a lot about different methods to control the panic attacks. Um, I've tried quite a few. My therapist suggested, like splashing cold water on your face or even dunking your face in a sink of cold water. Essentially, um,
Shock
it
yourself.
yeah, it sort of throws your parasympathetic nervous system into a little reset. So um, that helps sometimes, but if I'm cold, I have a tendency to shake, and it makes it worse. So, and there's been a few times, twice, I think actually, when I've had these panic attacks that I literally shake. And when I try not to shake, my teeth chatter and my knees bump together. Like it gets pretty bad sometimes. Um, I went to um, a psychiatrist and got a small prescription for some anti-anxiety medication that I'd taken before. It didn't actually work very well for me this time.
Are
But
you
I've,
talking about acute medicine, or are you talking
yeah,
about something you take to build up? Okay.
no, acute medicine.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's, it didn't seem to work for the kind of panic attacks that I'm having now. But I
Yeah.
found,
They gave you
the
something at
best,
first and it just made you feel heavy, I think you said.
yes, which was
And
worse
that,
because that made me feel like I couldn't breathe, which
yeah.
made it even worse. The second stuff, it helps me sort of in the long run because once it gets going, then I'm kind of amped up and my thoughts spiral and I might have trouble sleeping. So it like allows that part of it to calm down a bit so I can go to sleep. But it doesn't actually seem to be helping with the acute part of the panic, even if it's still going on when it kicks in. But I don't want to, really depend on that in any case. So for me,
Were there non-chemical things that you do?
well, that's where I'm going next. Um,
Oh,
so for me, I've kind of found, the self reassurance that this is that what this is. This is, just your nervous system going into overdrive. You are okay. You are okay. You are okay. And the breathing has helped too. Once I realized that, I essentially would stop breathing when it would happen. You know, taking like they say slow deep breaths is good, and that's great, except that I'm kind of oxygen deprived at that point. So I'll take a few like really big breaths to get some oxygen in my blood, and then I'll slow it down. Um, and really, it's just sort of, I hate to say mind out over matter, but that's kind of what it is at that point. Um, and since I've been back on my antidepressants, they've been fewer and far between. Um, I do still have them, but like I said, I've learned to kind of how for me I can talk myself out of it. It probably wouldn't work for everyone, but um, for me, I can kind of logic and soothe myself into a place where everything sort of slows down.
so with your long-term mental health medication, do you feel the magnitude of those anxiety attacks that you get are less, and it makes it
Yeah,
easier for you to talk yourself down?
yes, I actually do, which kind of makes sense because the acute medication that I was taking, um, I've done a little bit of research and it doesn't test well for PTSD, but my regular antidepressant does. So I think it's just I don't know what the neurochemical differences are there between the panic attacks I was having before or whatever, and this current situation now. But I'm not having as many. When I do, it's much a much quicker time between it starting and me being able to kind of get it under control. Um, I still haven't figured out what my triggers are, which is weird because, like I said, sometimes they just start in the middle of like nothing, um, and it's pretty. And I think there may actually be some kind of physical component to it sometimes. I've, I'm getting like allergic reactions to things, or at least sensitivity reactions to things that I haven't before because of some things that are going on with my stomach, like dairy, and I'm sensitive to things. They make me itch and give me hives and joint pain. And so I think in at least one of the panic attacks that I had some welts like coming up on my face after I'd taken a drink of something. So I don't know if there's I don't know if that's part of it, or if just that threw me into a bad panic attack or what. It's kind of difficult when you've got physical and mental symptoms going on to kind of untangle them sometimes.
Yeah, it's been the progress that you made. Um, I think it has been pretty awesome with them. I think what's really helped you a lot is outsider looking in as you being really aware of your body, getting used to how you feel at your baseline and
Yeah.
recognizing when something's off. And I think something that kind of shows some progress, with your mental health in its own little way is trusting yourself to know when something doesn't feel right instead of just going, oh, it's just in my head, and discounting yourself like you would for other things, right?
That is a huge
Uh,
one. I felt so stupid that night that we had to go to the ER because again, it's like, I don't always have a really high opinion on myself. So while, I would say to somebody else, I'm very kind and understanding and patient with other people. I would say to somebody else, it's better to be sure, let's go. I'll go sit with you. It'll be okay. We'll find out one way or the other. For me, like,
yeah,
I'm trying to hold off on whatever because I'm like, you're being stupid. You're going to waste money. Um, you know, like, you already did this once before, 18 months ago. And then there's this other part of me that's like, yeah, but it's better to be sure. And what if it's this? And so I have
yeah,
my self-talk is argument a lot.
yeah. And I can't make it easy. I have to be dying to go to the doctor. Like
That's the other thing. Like, I'm not gonna lie,
yeah,
having, I'm kind of the same way generally, like the whole I try to be tough and, work through it. And so then to see me
that's not
through,
even it for
what
me.
I
I just can't be
assumed.
bothered.
Well, and it depends on what it is. But like you said, you don't fuck around with your heart. Like if you think
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
then
But
you
like when
go.
I got rear-ended, and I ended up getting diagnosed with whiplash. I got rear-ended. I was like, I don't need to go to the doctor. And you're like, you're going. Like
Well,
stop messing about and get to the ER. You know,
and
fight with me to go.
that was another one of my panic attacks too, because I was talking to you and you seem fine, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm starting to get dizzy, like, and I'm thinking, you've got like some kind of embolism or some, brain bruise or something going on up there. And you're like, I'm gonna drive, and I'm like, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. And
Yeah.
so I ended up actually calling a friend of his to try to talk him out of it, and his friend talked to
Oh
him
yeah, I
while he
knew
drove because it was
instantly.
like 4 miles. But
Yeah. When my buddy called me, I was like, Sarah told you to call me, didn't she? And he's like, can't I just call my buddy? I was like, no, Sarah told you to call me, didn't she? He's like,
you were
what
so
if she did?
furious.
Yeah, I was, I was not tickled about that.
I know you were, but I was standing out in the backyard on the phone with him, like shaking because there was nothing I could do. and I was worried about you, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because I didn't want you to be upset with me. But at the same time, like, things like that can go badly before you know it. It was the you telling me you were dizzy. And then you were like, I shouldn't have even told you how I feel. And I was like, that's not the right reaction to this. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But, and that's, I mean, honestly, so being somebody who lives with somebody who goes through what you do, those are some of the things that I think about. Like, can I, what can I divulge? Like, being your significant other, I should be able to divulge anything that's going wrong. But am I going to trigger her? Like sometimes it becomes a risk benefit calculation. Like,
well, I can tell you
because if
without a
nothing
doubt.
is wrong with me, and then you have a freak out, then not only did I have to deal with whatever I had to deal with, I then have to focus on trying to calm you down and convince you that there's nothing wrong with me, which it can be exhausting.
Honey, you don't have to manage me in that sense. Even if I wasn't who I was, like even if I haven't been going through what I was going through, that I have a lot of medical knowledge, and I was concerned because of something you had said. I would have felt that exact way even if I wasn't going through what I'm going through right now. But I will tell you one thing, and that is you not telling me things and you saying things like I shouldn't have even told you makes me constantly concerned that there's something I don't know. Whereas if you're just honest with me and we can sit down and talk about it or whatever, then I can deal with whatever it is. I don't need
Yeah,
you
well, I
trying to
mean, I
manage
am. I
me.
tell you. Yeah, I mean, I do. I'm not gonna lie and say I'm not hesitant. But because it's. I mean, and this is. I'm saying this not to just have a conversation with you about it, but anybody who's listening, who has a significant other, who has anxiety, who goes through these things, and you're living with them as their partner. Um, it's easy to go, okay, I don't want to trigger them. Um, on the offset chance that there is something wrong, like it'll be so much worse for everybody involved when it comes to be that when it comes out that you thought there could have been something wrong and you didn't you didn't say there was something wrong, because then on top of everything else that goes on in your partner's head, um,
You're
then there
keeping
becomes
things from
trust
them.
issues. There's trust
Yeah.
issues that grow from that.
And that's always been my thing. You and I have talked about that, a million times. Whatever it is, we will deal with it. But don't, and it's not like I don't see you being stressed out over things. And I've said that to you a couple times, like, I see that you're stressed out, but I, honestly, I didn't know. I thought it was just you being stoic with, a couple of money issues that have come up at the house. And then you were like, you know what? Normally I'm fine, but I'm really not fine right now. But I don't. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And you're like, but I got to keep it together for you. You don't, like you don't. Like you being stressed or you being whatever you are, if nothing else, it makes me feel somewhat validated in my feelings, because that's the other thing that I don't know that you realize. Um, there are a lot of things I constantly question myself. Part of my fear of failure is I don't I don't trust my emotions a lot. I question whether I have the right to feel the way I feel. And when I come to you with things, it's usually after I've sat with it for a long time and I've gotten to the point where I just can't take it anymore, because I don't want to be naggy. I don't want to be one of those people who's, always talking about their feelings or whatever, because I know I'm messed up a lot. I know I am. And I know that, sometimes, you know, talking about emotional things, you have a tendency to you're an escapist or used to be a lot, and you're working on that, and I love you for that. But, I struggle with whether or not to talk to you about things, or whether I'm gonna seem like I'm put together enough for you. So, and I know, you know, if there ever was like a person made for someone else, it's you and me. Because like our lives have pushed us together. Fate has intervened a few times with you and I. And
Yeah.
you and I have so many sort of complementary and identical passions that we didn't even know about, 15 years ago. But I just knew you were mine. Like, but um,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot of that. Like, am I not only do I not really know if I'm overreacting, but I don't want to overreact to you.
Yeah. So what are some of your plans, or do you have um do you have a management plan that you're working on that you found that works for you? Um, with this, knowing that you are living constantly with the fear of failure, what are some of the tools that you're using? We've heard about therapy, and we've heard about long-term medication, acute medication, and I don't think you mentioned the meditation. You meditate on occasion, especially
Yeah.
with your son, and
So a
talking
lot of
yourself down. But what about prevention? Is there anything you're doing for prevention?
Well,
Um,
it's not just prevention, because those things are targeted at like essentially my non-functionality, because I have become non-functional with a lot of this creeping up. Um, I feel like, you know, the the resolution and the prevention part of that is I have to sit down and, continuing through therapy and find the time to sit down and deal with myself, to work through these things, to um you know I, I have
yeah.
used some sort of alternative treatments in the past that have been helpful with that, that I can't anymore. um so
Well,
I'm gonna have to.
you mitigate some of it by having a plan, by being ultra organized, right?
This is
Can you
true,
talk
yeah.
about that a little bit
Yeah, so
and what
I've
that's done for you?
because we have a lot going on, and I tend to kind of be the ringleader around here. So like all the organization and, you know, planning is really down to me quite a bit. Um, and so I found an app called Notion, which I'm kind of obsessed with. Um, and so I find if I take time, get everything organized there, then it's not constantly swimming around in my head, popping in and out, because I also have ADD. So, I'll think of something and then I'll be like, oh shit, I need to do this. And then before I know, like, I don't have time to do it right then. But then before I know it, I've also moved from thing to thing to thing and forgotten about that. So I have this like constant circle of, oh shit, going through my head on rotation. Um, so I find if I sit down, organize it all, and have like hierarchical lists have always been really important to me. So I have a list with a bunch of things, but then I have different sections. I have things that should have been done already. I have things that I need to do, as soon as possible. I have things that need to be done by the end of the day. And then I have sort of longer term things that, you know, end of the week or whenever you can type of things. And those emergency categories get rolled over from day to day. Um,
And the really
and that
important
helps
things
a
get
lot.
alarms,
Yes,
right?
yes. There's a lot of alarms and calendar reminders and all of that, especially because my son is homeschooled. And so I'm working from home, homeschooling him from home. And, we've got this list of things that we have to finish for the house in order to keep our home loan and, fire insurance and. So it's a lot. But I find that having the reminders, making sure that I take my AD meds every day, um, being organized, it takes a lot of the stress out because I have it on paper. I know in my head, I can just go, let it go. You've got it written down. You can come back to it when you need to. For now, just let it go and focus on one thing, which is huge for me, to be able to just focus on one thing at a time. And I found that I get so much more done that way, and I get so much more done now that I'm
And
not
you're not
spiraling as
mentally
much.
exhausted. Like since you
Yes,
started doing that, you're not because you're not it's not a constant thought exercise, a memory exercise to make sure you're staying on track. You're able to release that and give yourself the bandwidth to handle what's right in front of you instead of multitasking of what's in front of you and worrying about what comes next. And I think you've gotten some peace of mind from that.
definitely. And also,
And it's improved family life too. It's
yeah.
little things, and it's not. So Sarah doesn't just organize and plan out um, her to-do list, as in I have to do laundry, I have to finish on this project for work, we need to get wood to rebuild part of the deck. She also has the things that are most important in there, like spend time with her son.
Hmm.
We do a family game night with us, her son, and her son's father once a week. Having those things in there with reminders make sure it does. I think it doesn't just relieve the stress of having to remember it, but it saves you from the guilt you would have felt should you have missed it, especially those
Yes.
things.
And the other thing, which a lot of this was your suggestion, and I try to multitask. So a lot of times I work downstairs so that I can work on dishes or meal planning or be available for Micah, while like I'm in between tickets and stuff. I'm manager for a customer support, technical support team, and we do mostly, online tickets and things. So I'm fairly flexible, but um, I'm gotten to a point where like everything was suffering. My work was suffering. Micah, my son was
Yeah.
suffering. Our relationship was suffering, because I was trying to do too much at once, and I wasn't doing any of
Or
them well.
nothing had your complete focus at any given time.
Yeah, and
I
I
think
was
is part of the problem.
yeah, and that's where that a lot of that, mentally exhausted comes in because I would be bouncing back and forth, be like, okay, answer this ticket, go flip the laundry, then, get out the meat for later and then go back to another ticket. But, with my son homeschooling, there's a lot of like, mom, every 5 minutes, or, you being like, hey babe, like, what do you think of this? Or I found that, or whatever. And so where you sequester yourself upstairs when it's time to work, I haven't been doing that. And it's been
Yeah.
just
Oh yeah. I
so
have hard and fast rules because I've lived with severe ADD for a long time, and I know if I put myself in a distraction-rich environment, my work will suffer. And I take what I do for a living very seriously. I have a lot of downtime, but even though I have downtime, I make sure I'm available if I'm needed at a moment's notice. And for what I do, when that happens, it is extremely urgent and it needs to take place immediately.
and that
Um,
bothered me for a long time that, you had all this downtime and you were just up there watching YouTube when I felt like, you could take your computer downstairs and do other things. And I was
my work
envious
is my
of
work.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my work is my work. I do work during work time. I break for dinner on occasion. I'll help with your son when he comes up and he asks a question. If it's brought to me, I will interact. But because what I do for a living affords me to live a lifestyle that I enjoy, and I understand the importance of what I do. And the sense of urgency is when there are urgent things at work, they can literally be life or death for somebody. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't allow distractions. It is a hard line I have in the sand, and you and I have talked about it, and it was definitely a problem in the past. Um, but and it sounds callous, but it is what it is. This is my work, and I've told you, I've suggested you do the same thing, like at least for part of your days for work. Like if you're worried about your work is suffering, then you need to sequester yourself for part of that work day.
Yeah. And we
And
both,
you say it's like not that easy, but it really is, because the world isn't going to fall apart if you don't do it. Things will have to change. I will have to become a little bit more independent during the days. Your son might have to be a little bit more independent, but in my opinion, at the end of the day, we're gonna, like, the family unit will have some rough patches with the captain not available, because I mean, you captain this ship. We got no illusions here. You will have, um, I strongly believe that it would, just like you plan everything out, it would take a lot of stress off of you, because you're going to have that X amount of hours every day to focus on that, which is important to sustain the rest of your life that's important to you.
yeah. And we've kind of met in the middle with a lot of that stuff. Like you've,
And you started to
you know,
do it a
you've,
little bit.
you've brought your computer down to help, with dinner prep sometimes and things like that too, which helps out a ton. But yeah, no, you were right about that. And I do, like, I don't do it all day, and I'm kind of slacked off with it a little bit this last week just because you've got this big push on the loan house repair list. Um,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
but but yeah, you were right. For at least, the first 3 hours of my day or something, it helps to just have my butt parked in the chair. And with all
And
the
you
projects and things that I have going on, like it and it
and you get
and
a
that's
lot done in that 3 hours. When you have no distractions, you can get so much more done when you're not constantly, especially when you have ADD, because we both have it. Um, Getting ramped back up, doing something once you've been interrupted. It's not like, I think neurotypical people have the ability of just going right back to something, but at least for me, I have I have a ramp up. Like if I'm
yeah.
living in Excel world and my whole world is spreadsheets, I am not to be as effective as I was up until the moment I was distracted. It takes me literally 10, sometimes 15 minutes to get back into that flow state before I can do it. And on top of being ADD, for me, I'm really hugely dyslexic. So spreadsheets are like the devil, but I live in a world of data, and I am like a data hog. If I can get data for what I'm doing, I want all the data. Don't want anybody to decide what I need and don't need. I will analyze it and figure it out for myself. And so when I'm looking at spreadsheets, things get flipped around on me and it screws me up. But when I get to the flow state, all that confusion goes away. So when I get interrupted, like sometimes I'll get pretty irritated, and I feel like an ass sometimes, because your son will come up, he'll just be like, "Hey, do you want a hug?" And I'm like, "What?" And boom, I've been distracted even just for a moment. And I feel like an ass for being annoyed because he wants to give me a hug. And I'll be like, "Sure, buddy, always. I want a hug." And that 15-second interaction, he comes up, gives me a hug, and leaves. It takes me, next 10 minutes of my life is going to be figuring out how to get back in that flow state. Um, so when you have that time where you sequester yourself away to do your work, um, what would have, at least for me, in if I was doing it for 3 hours, I can get 6 hours, 7 hours of work done with this, 6 or 7 hours of distracted work done in 3 hours, because I'm just I'm just flying through it, you know. Um,
Yeah,
and and that's what I was hoping for you.
yeah, and can I just say before I make my next point, it's super cool having both of us on here at once because we're getting both sides of it, and I kind of dig this little dynamic. But um, um, yeah, and I've also actually found that if the breaks are on my terms, if I, you know, get done with something and I'm focused on that something, then when I have a minute, I can go check in on my son, make sure he's doing what he's supposed to do more often because I'm not just interrupt, 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 drop, pick back up, drop, pick back up.
Yep,
So I'm
because you complete
actually
the task
better.
when you feel like it's a okay time to pause. I think is what you're
Yeah,
saying,
I'm
right?
actually multitasking better this way than I
Hmm.
was before.
Yeah, controlled chaos instead of just pure chaos.
Exactly, yes. And I've got my, my little list of like what I need to work on next. So when I have a break or I get tired and I need a moment to shift my focus, then I can shift my focus and then work on those things I have planned, check on those things I have planned, and then come back and get focused again. And it's like magic. You're a genius for
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure it out. The when we I was so all over the place the first time we met. I don't know if you remember. I used to carry
Oh yeah.
around these little moleskin books, and they had different colored duct tape on it. And I had a Trio 650. To tell you guys
Yep.
how long ago this was, and I
I
had a
remember that
bunch of
trio.
alarms set on it. And every time, every couple hours, I had an alarm that went off it, and I had a blue alarm, a red alarm, a black alarm, a yellow alarm, a red alarm. And these alarms, when the alarm went off, that was for me to go into my notebook to see what task I was supposed to be working on during that alarm, or have I completed that task for the day? And it's
That's
how
like
I
my
stay.
varying hierarchical list. And
Yep.
I remember you check an email on that trio when we were in bed, and that was so weird back then.
Yeah. 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 It was, I had a pretty demanding job. Um, but I loved it. It was awesome. You know, so do you have, living with fear and, putting tools in place to help mitigate you spinning out because of self doubt or anxiety. Do you have any tools you've maybe talked to about with your therapist or read up on that you want to try that you haven't tried yet? And if so, what are they and what are your thoughts on them?
So, yes, I honestly I have a list of them somewhere with the information, and I
This is
can't. It's
another
it's
list
one of those.
doesn't surprise me.
Yes, it's one of those like as soon as it's out of my head, it's gone, and type of things. I've been interested in CBT, and I think I've started doing that a bit on my own. Don't ask me what CBT stands for. I can't remember. It's something about behavioral something, but it's essentially like mental diversion. Like you build in a pathway for yourself. When this happens, then you're prepared. You're going to do this instead. Instead of thinking about this, then you're going to go to this. My therapist has suggested like little mantras. You know, I'm a I'm a Christian sort of. I'm not super strict or anything, but non-denominational. But so and he is too. So he had a couple of Bible passages that he sort of refers to when he starts spinning out, and I think I have a couple that would work for me. But it's essentially a mantra. It's like he said you start out with like the full passage or the full statement, whatever it is, and then you sort of count down and you drop off a word or two every time you say it until you get to a certain point. And then it like both distracts you and gives you something different to focus on. And it because you're doing the counting and the focusing on dropping it down every time, it helps to shut off those other parts of your brain. Like when I was working, I used to work for a federal agency, and I was essentially doing data entry overnight. So I would listen to books on tape because they would shut up that part of my ADD brain that's always trying to talk to me. Um, and it allowed me to focus. So it's kind of like shutting up both parts of your brain at once for me. Um, and I
It's
haven't had
Beethoven
the
for me. That's my
yeah,
white noise.
yeah,
I need white noise or my self talk, which
yo yo ma,
doesn't need, huh? Yeah,
yo yo ma,
yo ma. Yeah,
yeah,
cello solos. But it's that white noise because then the self talk happens, but not in the way where I've messed something up or I'm cheerleading myself. It's the it's the squirrel. Let's go ride
yes,
bikes. I wonder
y-
what summers in Siberia is like,
yes,
you know?
exactly that one. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly that one. So
because
if you like, it's
it
like
keeps you on track.
it's the little hyper kid in your brain. You give him an iPad to keep him busy while mom and dad are trying to work, essentially.
There you go. Yeah, my squirrel gets a pacifier.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah. Um, and my God, like just as an aside, well, I guess it's not really an aside because this is something that I deal with fear of failure on all of the time. Like the whole working and doing homeschool thing is kind of hell. And I don't even do hardcore homeschool. It's an online school that specializes in remote students. And my kid's really smart. Like he is. He has uh, ASD, so he's on the spectrum. So taking that social piece out of school for him was kind of magical. Like he caught up to where he was supposed to be, and now he just flies through everything. But
Yeah.
even just those little points where you have to sit down and work with him on something and work, it's like I so much. Like, and a lot of parents were doing that, during the beginning of the pandemic, and it's so much. So yeah, I've had to come up with
It
these
worked so
coping.
well though for him.
Yeah, it really does. But I've had to come up with these coping strategies because what was it, 3 weeks ago, a month ago? I had to take most of a week and a half off to work on my organizational stuff and just spend me time because I had it
Hmm.
like it was shortly after that Paul episode. I think I had like a little breakdown. I got to the point where the panic attacks were out of control. I couldn't function. I was feeling like shit because I felt like I was falling apart, and I don't fall apart. Like I keep everybody else together. I don't fall apart, but I was falling apart and it was affecting everything. I know it was hard on you. It was hard on Micah, and I'm sorry for that. And I feel, even though I know I shouldn't, I feel weak because, you managed to deal with all this shit and keep it together. But, I hit a point where I just couldn't anymore. And that makes me feel weak. And I don't like that. I like being strong for everyone else.
Part of the
But
human condition,
I
you
know.
know. But I think there's a I the keeping it together and giving ourselves the mental bandwidth to do things. I just kind of had an observation in my head pop up where you hate to cry. You hate if anything makes you cry. And if I feel like I need to cry, I'm gonna just let it out. I I I have the benefit of having the super rough youth that I had. I've proven everything that I have to prove to anybody in my entire life in those early years. Um, and I got to a place which is hard for a lot of guys. Like it, it it's it is not the societal norm for a guy to just be able to. I feel like I need a boohoo. I'm a boohoo. I don't care if I'm in the middle
So,
of Safeway. I don't care where I am, and giving myself those releases so I don't avoid giving myself the release of being able to do that, and I don't feel guilty for doing that.
so you have to
And
kind of,
so,
sorry, go ahead.
oh no, no, go ahead.
So you have to kind of understand both where that comes from. And it's not that I I think crying is a bad thing, but because I was the same way. Like I'm very I'm very I used to be anyway, extremely emotionally vulnerable with people, like to a fault, because I think it's important. But also, this is another one of those hangups that's gotten to me recently because, um, you know, having no friends, like my slot that I carved out for myself was being a tomboy, being a cool guy, essentially. And so that was my group of friends. Like none of them were ever sexually interested in me. That never happened, but I could be the cool girl that they wanted to hang out with. I was an oddity or a novelty. Um, and so I picked up a lot of those bad habits. Like I'm not the usual girl. I'm not the one who's going to nag you. I'm not the one who's going to talk to you. I guess in some sense, I sort of hoped that that would, give me an in to have a relationship with someone. Um, but also like um, the the frequency that it's been happening to me the last couple of years since I left his father and you and I got back together. Um, and I don't, we have a roommate and your brother lives with us and we have Micah. I don't want to be that girl who's always crying over everything. And I've got to keep it together for my kid. And there have been times where I've gotten in the car and gone to a parking lot somewhere and just sit and bawl. But also because I was always alone, because I never had anybody, because it was either me and my parents, we lived out in the country, and I was alone dealing with their shit, well, either of them because they divorced, or because when I was upset, I didn't have any friends. I was there for everyone else, but no one was ever there for me. So me sitting and crying alone is like the worst thing. But at the same time, I'm kind of protective of it. And I know sometimes you, you and I don't always agree on what should happen in those situations. So I found myself crying and alone a lot because when I'm freaking out and I try to tell you what I need, it sounds like I'm attacking you because my voice is, crazed basically because I am a mess. And so you tend to shy away from me in those moments. And you've been working on that. And I so appreciate that. But like for me, I've got that whole toxic masculinity. It's a weakness thing when it comes to being around other people. I believe in the power and the value of crying. And I want to hold it together because I don't want to make you uncomfortable and I don't want to be alone. I
I
mean,
think it's kind of
that's just
strange.
real.
I think it's kind of strange how we ended up because I grew up the tough guy, kind of gangster, right? And out of the two of us, you're the one who suffers a lot of the negative sides of that toxic masculinity upbringing. It just shows you how different, how you can't really, the expectations aren't, uh, or expectations are fickle things. Um,
Yeah.
because you would think that for all intents and purposes, the way I grew up, I should be that stiff upper lip, like type of like a tough guy, can't cry in front of anybody, and put on a Pixar or Disney movie, and I am boohooing so hard, you know. Like how many times have we been watching a movie or TV, and I'll look at you and I'll tell you, "Shut up! I'm not crying. You're crying," as I'm bawling my eyes
Mm-hmm.
out, right? You know, um, and I just would never have thought that the tomboy in the group would have picked up that toxic masculinity culture of stiff upper
There's a
lip stuff.
there's a lot of that with girls too, though, certain girl groups, because like I had mostly guy friends. The girl friends that I had were like me, they're smart and tough and they are not like, the cutesy, popular girls. So we had to become the tough girls, and that's just not the mean girls, not the like, not the beating people up girls, but smart and we didn't let anything touch us emotionally. And part of that is, not being whiny and cryy. Like, you deal with your shit and you get past it, and that's that. And like I said, it's not like, and it's an odd place for me to be in my head because, like I said, I believe in the value of sharing your emotions and being vulnerable and crying. And I'm a strong believer in all of that. But I still have this thing in my head that, tells me that if I complain about things too much, then I'm going to be a whiner. Or if I,
Yeah.
if
Well,
I have a,
personal thoughts and beliefs are, while also being curtailed by societal expectations, that we've endured. That's quite the, conundrum, right?
yeah,
It's
because if I have
consciously
this,
clear mind, but you're taught at a young age that, from your, like, the lizard brain, this is how I protect myself, you know, is to isolate during those things. Don't show weakness, you know,
it's the
or the
same
boogeyman
struggle
can
that a
get me.
lot of guys have, being able to
Yeah,
be vulnerable and tough at the same time. That's
yeah,
that's a thing with us too. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Where I will appear to be apathetic at times, and uh, it appears that I don't care, and it's just me processing.
yeah,
It's not,
we have
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think if we have, one sort of hiccup with our communication and our relationship, it's that, like, when you are unsure, you are timid, you're great at you've had so much psychological training and self-training, and you're fantastic with people, but when it hits close to home, then it becomes hard for you and you blank. And
Well,
you know
that comes from, personal experiences. So I've been married a couple of times, and I have been in emotional minefields. So it's like, in a lot of those situations have been damned if I do, damned if I don't. Um, and so I have, um, it has been a learned behavior for me to disengage, shut the fuck up. I tell myself in my head, like, my self talk at that point is, like, pump the brakes, shut the fuck up, listen, process. Don't just speak out off the cuff, because that has gotten you in trouble in the past. Don't do it. And so maybe in those times I'm over analyzing, and that, and me, while I'm processing and over analyzing, emotion doesn't really radiate from me. And I've been told, not just by you, but by others, like, I like, you're just you haven't said this, but I've had somebody tell me, like, you're just an apathetic POS. And I was like, apathy is not part of my vocabulary. Like, no, no, I'm a very, very, very caring, overly emotional individual sometimes. Um, I just don't know. I I have learned I've been taught not to trust my emotions in the moment,
I'm the same
because
way.
I've got, well, and
That's
that
what
sounds like
causes
an
me to
unhealthy
spiral,
thing.
is not trusting my own head and my own feelings. But I also
Yeah.
just realized another parallel, and
Okay.
that is, like, when you are handling me because you are afraid that you're going to trigger me, I handle you in the same way when I'm upset, because you have a tendency to leave, to distance yourself, which is like my biggest fear when I'm upset, is being alone. And so, I, like, the other day, I was trying to tell you, uh so part of my breakdown with, you know after Paul's episode the other night, was not, like I said, getting texted back, and it really had nothing to do with the person who was texting me, but I was bawling, and he came up and asked me what was wrong, and I was like, I just need a minute because I need to be able to. I'm not in a space to talk about it. And so he gave me a hug, which was brilliant. And then he asked again, what, like, tell me what's going on. And so I did. But when I told him, they're not texting me back, and it just throws me back to when I was a kid and this and this and this. And bless you, love, your response was, well, you don't know what he meant by that. And that had nothing to do, like, it was just a trigger. It wasn't really what was wrong. And so I was like, don't do that. Don't do that because it has nothing to do with it. And then, you make me feel like I don't have the right to feel this way. But I was bawling and really upset when I said it. So to him, it sounded like I was yelling at him. And I wasn't. And you are.
Well, you were yelling at me. It just wasn't in anger.
I was yelling, but not, I was
Yeah.
yelling to you, not at you though.
Okay.
And so if there are two things that I guess I need you to know, it's one, I understand I'm not always difficult, that I'm not always easy to deal with when I'm like that, but I just need you there. Whatever you are, I just need you there. And try not to correct or fix what I'm feeling because I just need to feel it, and I just need somebody to tell me it's okay that I feel it. Like, those would be the two things. But like I said, even if I do yell, like, I'm not yelling at you. I'm just freaking the fuck out, and I don't like to be alone when I'm freaking out because that is my, yeah.
Yeah, and where you and I are the opposite. Like when I am overwhelmed with something, I just need to just give me a minute, give me some space. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me. Don't try to interact. I don't want hugs. I don't want affection. I don't want kisses. I want to be left the fuck alone. And you're good at that.
And I give you what you need because I know that.
Yeah.
But for me, that's not how I operate. I need you there. And the handling you part is like, you'll notice as soon as I said that, I was like, I'm sorry. I'm not like trying to be mean. I'm just trying to tell you what I need. I was like, I'm sorry. Because I'm trying to handle you, even though I know I'm breaking down. I know that I don't have the mental bandwidth to even pick my next words, but I'm still trying to handle you so that I don't upset you and have you leave.
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel like you're fucking up because I know that you feel that way,
Yeah. 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 I think it's very telling that even in crisis, you're still thoughtful, like that, which, I appreciate. And there's definitely times where it needs to be all about you and in that moment,
I
appreciate you mitigating, trying to mitigate what you perceived could be something negative. The effort is absolutely appreciated. Is there anything else that you want to talk about on living with fear?
Yeah, I suppose there's one other thing that I don't really talk about much, because it's embarrassing and it's vulnerable, and that is, and I kind of touched on a little bit of it earlier, like the not feeling like, people want to deal with my shit, and so I hide a lot. But there's a lot of, basically, if you know anybody like me, um, reach out, because we may tell you the first or the second or the third time that we're okay, or that, we don't need help, or that, but really it's that we don't want to bother you, and we don't want to seem or feel like we're intruding on whatever is going on in your life, because, like I said, for a long time, pardon me, I really felt like my position in the world was to take on other people's shit because it seemed like that was the only place I fit in. So, um, it's hard to ask for help and ask what I need, especially if there is the slightest bit of a resistance, even if it sounds like resistance, if it sounds like hesitation, even if it's something else, even if like you're trying to think about how you can rearrange your schedule to be there for me, if it sounds like the tiniest bit of hesitation, then I will just withdraw and I will make you believe that never mind, everything's fine, I'm good. Like I will suck it up until I get out of earshot and then I will just break down. And it sucks because it takes me it takes me way too much to get to a point where I will reach out. Um, I will only reach out right before I'm about to collapse. So, and that's a me thing. I get that. You know, that's something I need to work on and I am trying, but it is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Um, to
And I think it's an important message that like Sarah was saying, anything that's anybody who's that you may know that's like her, you know, the little white lies of I'm okay, I don't need anything, are because they don't want to inconvenience you. And if you feel like you're overstepping, just the reminder that you're there, showing just the inquiring sometimes can be helpful.
yeah,
Knowing that somebody cares enough to check in and check in, even if you check in multiple times a day, it doesn't need to be a full on conversation. Just a little reminder that, hey, I'm thinking about you or
yep,
anything like that. Something that it's a little manipulative, I'll admit, but if with Sarah, if I need her for something and to make her feel needed, she will allow me to be around.
yeah,
It's,
that's fair. That's true.
you know, but if she feels like um, it's not care but pity, that's not a good thing. Like she doesn't
Yeah,
want pity, she Sarah and people who go through the same type of thing like Sarah need to be reminded they're loved sometimes. You're not an
a lot
inconvenience.
even.
Yeah, you're not an inconvenience. You aren't some you're not somebody who needs to be picked up when they're broken. You're just wanted in general. Um, there's a
The
lot of
thought that there are
reassurance in
people
that.
who want to be around me and who, like I'm not an imposition on the way that they are to me, it's a very foreign concept.
Yeah,
And you've been starting to do ease thing where like when I'm upset or I'm venting, you go, are you looking for help or are you just looking for an ear? And that has been amazing.
yeah, yeah. So I think summing up a little bit about living with the fear of failure is it sucks, but there is stuff that can be done to help get rid of some of that suck, to prevent some of it. Um, I think one of the messages here is that if you have the ability, um, seek help for it. Um, there are plenty of services out there that do therapy on a sliding scale.
Yes.
If you need help finding one, we would be more than happy to help you find somebody in your area. We're not connected to anybody specifically. We're not sponsored. We just want everybody to get the help that they want. We're
Yeah, and we have a
if
Discord. You are welcome to reach out to me anytime. I don't check messages daily, but I've been in that place where you want help so badly, but you just don't, you feel like you're imposing on somebody or you don't want to press or whatever. Like, we're happy to help find whatever resources we can or, be a sounding board or whatever that is. And
yeah,
for the people in our lives, I've sort of realized lately that, people with this kind of self opinion or, background or issues, like we have some trying needs, but we're pretty awesome people because we tend to think about, you more than us, and we're generally pretty good to be around, but it's a hard place to be in your own head.
Yeah. And if you suffer some of the things that Sarah shared, no, you don't always have to be the caretaker. It's okay to reach out. We don't have our email address for Sarah yet, but we will certainly have to make one here. If you want to get a hold of Sarah and you don't have Discord, strongly encourage you to sign up for Discord. Go to mimental.net to icon top right corner of the screen, and it's an instant invite to our Discord server. You can find her there, or you can email me at boss@mimental.net. That's AUS Alpha Uniform Sierra, first part of Boston. And if you just say, "Hey, Sarah," I'll know you're not trying to get a hold of me, and I'll just share her the email. Um, I probably won't even read it. Um, but help is out there. Um, there are tools you can use, things you can put in place to make life a little bit easier to help you on that journey to healing. And if you'd like any of us here at MI Mental to be a part of that healing journey, we're willing to do whatever we can to help you out and to help you
Yeah.
find the resources you may need. Sarah's happy to share with you the things in more detail, the systems that she has in place for herself that have helped her out and helped keep our family stable at the same time. Thank you, baby. Um, you know, uh, but as much as you are invested in the people you care about, it's okay to have that same level of investment in yourself. It's
Yes.
important too. What is it the other day we were saying, it's important to be the friend to yourself that you are to other
Or to
people,
everyone else. Yeah, for sure.
you know? Um, and we hope everybody can learn how to do that. It's tough, but I believe in all of you, and I know you can do it. You think this is a good time to wrap up, baby?
I do. And it seems like he is still having a migraine, so we may be live for a while, but we're gonna end it here. Um,
We we are. Sarah, I want to say thank you for sharing all this. It's a lot putting all this out into the wild to share with everybody, and I'm sure you're going to make a difference in somebody's life tonight.
I hope
Um,
so. I mean, I feel like it's therapeutic for me too, but also it lets me get out those things that I felt like I needed to say but weren't, important enough to say, I guess. So,
mhm, yeah.
yeah, I hope that somebody takes this like raw honesty and it helps them in some way.
All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you listening to our podcast. Uh, please share it with your friends. Um, help others know that they're not alone, and that mental health is health. So thanks for listening tonight. I'm off.
I'm Sarah. Good night, everyone.
Good night.